Hi, I am Mark Malkoff, and welcome to Inside Late Night, presented by LateNighter.com. Today's guest is comedian Laurie Kilmartin, who wrote for Conan O'Brien for 11 years during his TBS run. We also discuss her recently writing for Conan on the Oscars, her stand-up special currently on Hulu, and much more. Now, it's time to go inside Late Night. Laurie Kilmartin, thanks for talking with us.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here.
11 years writing for Conan for his TBS show. You recently did the Oscars. You wrote for the Oscars. And in terms of doing well, Conan, I mean, it was just like, it was a grand slam. I mean, who gets asked 51 weeks beforehand if they'll do the Oscars the next year? What was that experience like?
It was so fun. The show ended in June of 21. And then we stuck around for an extra quarter because he was thinking of doing a show on Max, but it turned into the travel show, but he was thinking of doing like a more of a talk show on Max. So I guess it's been since October of 21 where I've just been out here in the wild without a writing job, just making a paltry living off of stand-up. And I was so used to being alone and walking around in circles in my house that when we all started meeting again at Conan's production office, we were all just so grateful to be hanging out together and sitting around a table and throwing out ideas and writing jokes. And it was really fun. The lead up to it was really fun. It was fun stress. It was, I hope this is funny stress. And then the actual night was unlike anything I've ever been a part of. It was so big, more than I could have anticipated, just the level of security at the show and how it was so many people were involved in making the Oscars, and the production value, I guess, was astonishing. Like nothing I'd ever seen. With Conan, we just worked on the TBS show. So it was, you had like $5 per sketch or whatever to spend. And just to see, like ABC, the Oscars, they spend money. They bring a ton of people in. And it was really overwhelming and exciting that night to be there.
How long were you working? Were you writing with Conan and the team leading up to the Oscars, roughly?
He contacted us in early December. In fact, it might have been like a week before his parents passed away. So we were kind of starting early. And then all of a sudden these kind of things started, he had that double tragedy, and then the fires happened. There was a lot leading up to it. I'll tell you.
That video is really fun when you're with Mike Sweeney and you're on Inside Conan, and Conan does kind of like the Bob Hope walk on like Johnny Carson did.
Yeah.
And it was so unexpected. He knew you were in the building and he got really excited that he crashed. I loved that they captured that on video. That must have been a kind of a thrill.
It was a thrill. I mean, he always crashes into the writers' meetings anyway. Usually it's us. He doesn't really get involved in that till later on, so he spared all of our terrible ideas. They do get filtered a little bit, so he gets the better ones. So, but he'll crash, he'll burst in and then take over. So, I mean, he's so funny. We always love it when he does, although that means we're there an extra hour, but it's a funny hour, so it's okay.
It happens. There's certain writers that are so good at what they do and were so valuable in terms of late night. Somebody like an Alex Bays maybe, or a Bill Sheff that was with Letterman forever. And you would think that they were able to get it right away or pretty soon. But Bill Sheff, I think, took 7 years to get hired at Letterman. Alex Bays took years until he got hired on Saturday Night Live, and now is at Seth Meyers. And you wanted to work on Conan's show. You were a monologue writer, and you did packets on the NBC show. You did the 12:30 show, the Tonight Show.
Uh-huh.
And so how many did you only do one packet for each show and it didn't work out?
Yeah, I did a packet for Late Night, and I don't know that I was the right hire at that point anyway, but I did it. I did a packet. And then the Tonight Show, I heard that I might have been hired at the Tonight Show, but then all the stuff with the Tonight Show happened. So I heard that packet might have done the trick, but there's no way to prove that, and it doesn't matter anyway. And then the third one was the TBS show. So that was my third packet.
Do
Mhm.
you think that the TBS show you would have gotten hired and been motivated if the last comic standing, if people weren't so mean on the message boards? Because I know you've done some interviews saying that you were so depressed and it kind of was driving you to you started writing jokes and putting them on Facebook, and it just kind of led you to write all this material, and then you had something like 200 jokes that you submitted your favors to Conan. Do you think that
That's
that
true.
actually was something that might have helped, or do you think it would have happened either way?
I mean, maybe. I do remember that now. I was like, do I suck? And then I just started posting a bunch of jokes on Facebook. That was pretty much the thing at the time. I don't think Twitter wasn't around, or wasn't a big thing, you know? So I did have, when I heard that Conan was hiring, I did have a nice backlog of current events jokes to pick from. So it definitely helped.
How long does that take for that skill set? Because to write jokes for a monologue, Alex Bays couldn't do it at first, and it took him years of doing that. And Seth Meyers calls him the greatest living joke writer. Obviously, Seth hasn't read your material. But in terms of that skill set, that muscle, it's such a specified thing, especially, Conan has a very specific rhythm with his monologue. How long do you think when you started writing, I mean, you're a stand-up, so you know how to write jokes, but in terms of writing monologues, how long do you think it took you to get good?
It's a learning process for a stand-up, because we write for ourselves so differently. It's so personal, and a monologue joke is so impersonal. It's almost the opposite way of coming at something. And also, you're not writing about yourself, you're writing about current events. And learning to write monologue jokes is a great skill that will positively influence your stand-up. But being a good stand-up does not make it an easy ride to being a good monologue joke writer. I think, everyone has their own style too. Every host has their own joke style, and you kind of learn as you go what your host likes to do, the kind of jokes that they're really good at telling. That's their strength. Not everyone can do deadpan. Not everyone does act out. Like, everyone's got their own thing that makes them funny. And so you kind of want to learn to write well for that person.
11 years. You did some interviews saying that early on, and I get this, there's some anxiety. You're getting up at 8:15. You have to be funny every single day. It's like a factory. It's a machine. You're churning this out. How long did it take you until you felt you could maybe just relax a little bit, or did that never go away?
A really long time. Like, the first day, we weren't on the air yet when I started, so it wasn't like I was jumping onto a moving train. We were getting ready for it, maybe like, I guess we debuted in November, and I started sometime in September. So I had some chance. We were just writing tons of jokes, and I was like, because I had written on other shows, but they were not this demanding. It was a lot of waiting around, and it wasn't like I need X amount of jokes by 11 a.m. and then another chunk at 12:30, et cetera, et cetera. So I was terrified that I would not be able to keep up. I learned, and I did have some, weeks where I wasn't getting anything on. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And so for me, what I did was I took like a bunch of Conan's monos that he had done successfully on the show, and I sort of broke each joke down into the kind of a joke it was, just to get myself in his rhythm, and so that was very helpful for me. And so anytime, later I didn't need it, but earlier when I would be stuck, I would like look at the joke templates I had written that were off of his, the style of joke that he liked to tell. And I would kind of, if I had a subject I was working on and I wasn't getting it, I would kind of look at the templates and see how I could fit it in there.
You were very unique writing for Late Night, because this doesn't normally happen, that you'd be with Conan in his dressing room with other monologue writers before the show. And what was he like before the show? There's some anxiety for some hosts. Others, like Jimmy Kimmel, I heard, is just very loose. What was that like?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I'm always interested how other hosts do their monologues and stuff. So Conan would have all the mono writers. At first it was like 5 of us, and then it ended up just being 2 the last couple, maybe the last year, but minus COVID, of course. But when the show got smaller and smaller to like half hour or shorter. Oh, it was lots of fun. I mean, there's lots of making fun of the jokes. how bad they are.
Conan would make
Yeah.
fun of the
Oh,
writers.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And, or, just, I don't know, just making fun of the jokes or making fun of the writer. I mean, it's almost just like loosening up your tongue and making fun of whatever was in front of you. So it was a lot of fun. That's the thing I missed the most. And I didn't realize it till we were back writing for the Oscars is how much I laughed every day and was entertained. Like I always remember thinking, it's like I'm getting a very private concert with like 5 or 7 other people starring Conan O'Brien and Andy Richter.
I love hearing that.
Every day, like 4 days a week,
I was talking to one of your old monologue colleagues, Rob Kuttner, today, and he was he pointed out that for some reason they would write you as a nurse. You would be on the show. What was that an inside joke? I have no idea why you'd wind up as a nurse. You didn't study to be a nurse. You didn't have aspirations.
I think a couple times I think I had maybe have a nurse face. And I also think they have one nurse uniform and it's like a size 14, which really, that works for me. So that's probably it more than anything else. I fit into the uniform. And I don't think the nurses have a lot of lines. So I wasn't risking the comedy of the sketch. You could put me in for a line or two and I'd be okay.
You're on the Warner Brothers lot. I mean, it's just this amazing history. What was one or two in those 11 years, the most surreal things that you saw either on the lot or backstage? I mean, it was just so many people parading around that lot.
We were mostly inside the studio. You'd go get lunch or something at the cafeteria or but it wasn't a lot of stuff. Every time someone makes a movie about show business, they're walking by dwarves and people in costumes and stuff. And that didn't really happen to me. I'm sure it may have happened to other people. Apparently, because we were on the same lot as Ellen, and something crazy like they'd stop the traffic light so that she could make an uninterrupt. She could just go left out of the studio and not have to be waiting at the light while people pointed and went, Ellen. So they would like change traffic so she could just make a quick left outside of the studio and go home.
That's different. How many other comedians that you know of in 1996 had their own website? Did Dane Cook even have a website in 1996?
Was he even born in 1996?
I'm not sure. We have to do some research on that. Researcher. But 1996, how do you go about that? I mean, it was so... I don't even know where to start. I mean, you did an interview saying that even back then people weren't even saying .com. They were saying period, instead of dot.
I remember I was going through old, videotapes, like VCR tapes. Yeah, videotapes, whatever. And VHS tapes. Oh my God. And just digitizing them for what? I don't know, but I'd like to have them for maybe my great grandchildren if they exist, and if humanity exists, they could take a look. But one of my credits was that I have my own website, and that was enough of a credit to people be like, "Wow." I don't know. I just was kind of interested in it. It wasn't like basic HTML was pretty easy. The stuff you did, the back end stuff to make a website, and it was kind of fun. And websites weren't that fancy. So pretty much anyone could, like Drudge, his website is still exactly the way it was when he started it, probably in 1990.
Who is that?
Matt Drudge, the Drudge Report.
That's a good point. Yeah, with this branding, yeah.
Yeah, so most websites were like that for a long time, with a couple of graphics you could borrow or steal from like a graphics place. So it wasn't that hard. And I would write a weekly blog, although it wasn't called that, just to kind of account for what it was like to be a road comic. The few people that were on the internet. It wasn't like I had a huge audience. It was just a couple people that were on the internet as well. It was definitely not a big crew. And when I went on the road, you had to bring your own modem and hook it up to the hotel phone. And that means you couldn't get a phone call. And, so it was a lot. But also, I was so lonely on the road. I spent so much money on AOL chat rooms. It was like $2.95 a minute or an hour or something like that.
I never would have thought of that. So yeah, that was really early on. I always love talking to people, and I've talked to maybe, I don't know, like a dozen people that worked on Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn, only because there is never, that I know of, a television show, certainly late night, that was run like this. The stories that I hear of how it just was around the office and the culture was just so, nothing scandalous. It was not scandalous. It was just peculiar in my opinion. I don't know if you agree or not, but in terms of like, you think that they would be just focused on the work, but there'd be boxing and going on, and just, I don't know. I would
That's
talk to
probably
people.
just Colin loosening up. I think every host has their own weird things they do to, because they are trapped in this building until they do the show. And you get your adrenaline up and you can't really go for a walk because, in Conan's case, you're amongst you have to stay focused and you have to meet with people, but you want to kind of get some time alone in your head. So, I think probably every host has some crazy rituals they do they wouldn't normally do in an office, just because they're not doing what anyone normally does. They're hosting a show. It's a big deal.
The environment, everyone I talked to absolutely loved the place. It just seemed like I had never heard. I'm not doing a good job with my examples, but what was your experience like there? What are a couple things that stand out from Tough Crowd?
Well, I mean, I loved it. It was my first writing job. I was just filled with anxiety. Um, Ken Ober was the head writer. He has passed away. He was on this MTV show with Colin.
Remote Control.
Yes, that's right. And Ken was the greatest. I loved him. And Brian Tucker, who's also like one of the head writers at SNL right now, he was like maybe second in command under Ober. I don't know. It was a lot of fun. I didn't know what a writing job was. I didn't know what it was like. I didn't know if you just sat and wrote all day or what. And this one was real loose. And we only, Colin mostly wrote his opening salvo probably with Ken. I think Ken wrote it a lot with it. And then we were kind of more responsible for the act threes. And sometimes we try to work with the comics if they wanted anyone to work with them. But it was real loose, and it wasn't like any other writing job I'd ever have after.
You've been doing stand-up. You've done so much television on Kimmel, on Corden. After Midnight, which I just heard 2 hours ago, was canceled, unfortunately.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Your episode, I heard, did. No, that's not true. That did not do it out. But
wait,
yeah,
it was really canceled?
Yeah, that's what it said. Unfortunately, and I don't think they're going to replace it with anything. So, yeah, I was pretty. Just because I know people that work there and stuff, I thought that was such a shame. What you were on? So let's just talk about that. What was your experience like?
Can I just double check you? That is
please.
insane.
I would love that. I would absolutely love for you to do that.
Why?
This has never happened on my podcast before on anything out of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: it's so cheap to produce. Taylor wanted to go back to. I could see her wanting to go back to doing. I mean, this girl is filling theaters. She's on I could see that, but why not have somebody else do it? It's so cheap it's as cheap. I'm telling you, this is as shocking to me as when Tough Crowd was canceled or as Comedy Central said, not picked up. But like, it's so cheap. The comedians cost nothing. Trust me, I've done it twice. They have a small writing staff. Wow. That is really wild. I definitely think they could have kept it going with a different host.
I was surprised. Those things take a while. I was very surprised that it didn't get more time. I mean, her career, she's going to be fine. It was just, I was.
And like her stand-up is like, she's a great stand-up. She's filling, to have to do a show 4 nights a week and then host, go tour on the weekends. It's exhausting. And I think she's doing it for a year. And I think she kind of, from what I heard, she sort of got talked into doing After Midnight. She's a comic, and I think maybe this wasn't, her dream job. But, there's so many comics who this would be their dream job. I'm really surprised they're not trying it with somebody else. That's
I'm surprised as well. That's what it seems like the news is coming out, that they're not going to replace it. You mentioned something on Twitter that I had never really thought about, and I thought this was so interesting. You have stand-up comedians normally are going out in front of, just when they're starting out, open mics. You might have just a few people, if you're lucky, Maybe you get some clubs might let you on really late at night and stuff. But traditionally, you're not playing when you're starting out for big audiences. But you wrote on Twitter that now with social media, there are comedians that are starting their careers with sold out shows. That is unbelievable to me to really think about, because it used to be people would ask advice and stuff, and it normally would take, a bunch of years to find your voice and to build up to that point. The only person I can think of that was unique was, I believe, Bob Newhart, because didn't he record a record without, I don't know if it was a small audience, but he'd never really performed live like that before. I think he might have been, or nightclubs.
I think that's right. I forget.
I know that Newhart might have been the one person, but besides Newhart, I mean,
besides a genius, yeah,
yes, it's such an interesting point, and good for them if they can do it. But I mean, you're not going to find your voice within a year. But I guess, I mean, if you're selling out places and stuff, and you can just kind of,
that doesn't mean you found your voice. It just means you're selling out. You're just selling tickets.
It does mean that eventually, I was going to say, if you keep doing it, you're going to find your voice if you can keep having those people show up. But it's just such a strange to be selling out places like that when you have not done it for that long.
Here's the thing. I'm not sure. I don't know. But to me, part of finding your voice is bombing. And if because you start to, you tell 3 jokes, nothing happens. And then you tell another joke and you did something different. Maybe you did a emotion, or, it was how you delivered it, but you're like, okay, that kind of thing works. I can do that. Right. So you really need to be convincing strangers that you're funny. And if you're already selling something out, they're not strangers. You're a celebrity. So you're not getting the right read on what's funny about you.
That's a really good point.
I don't know that you are going to find your voice that way. I mean, you might do well, but I don't know. I could be wrong, but I really feel like there are people that have started stand up after they got famous. And to me, it doesn't feel, something feels off.
Oh, it feels like
without naming names.
I'm not naming names, but it feels like 100% they need to pay their rent. I mean, and just make a living, and that's fine. They're established. I mean, we all know who a lot of these people are, and they're playing zanies, and they're probably doing very well based on previous stuff that they've done. But yeah, they're not. I wouldn't say that they're stand-ups by any means. Maybe they do, but yeah, it's completely different. You're a New York Times best-selling author. You've
barely.
You are, though. You've put out books. You're writing. You have a big following on X. Used to be called Twitter. And when your father, and was it 2014 was when he passed away? You were. I mean, this was like 9 days, 10 days where you were tweeting, and people got really emotionally invested. You're a very, very gifted writer. At what point did Norm Macdonald reach out to you? And I know that he was giving you some Bible verses, either for comfort, or was it when your father passed away? How did that work?
He didn't reach out to me directly. He tweeted to me. Like, I had tweeted something, I forgot, but something about just being, it was the night that my dad had died earlier in that day. And I was just in the garage, which was his office. He converted it to this labyrinth of, plywood bookcases. It was the ugliest you've ever seen, but it was so my dad. And just alone with all of his stuff was a really shocking night, And I think so. I tweeted something about that, and then Norm replied with something really comforting, which I can't remember. I mean, if I was a good person, I could remember it off the top of my head, but that was it. He just replied to it. That was very helpful at that night.
I know that you were on an Apple TV show. Hillary Clinton, did she produce a show called Gutsy, and you were on that? What was that experience like?
It was she featured comics on, I think maybe the episode was about comedy or being funny, but then she went to a clown school. I was like, all right.
Really?
Yes.
Oh goodness. Okay. I have to look that up. Like, you looked up Midnight. I have to look up. Is Laurie telling
I would not look up clown school. So it was. So she sat down with 3 comics. It was myself, Yamanika Saunders, and Maysoon, and it was Hillary and Chelsea. And they just talked to us about stand-up and comedy and being funny. And I gave her my theory, which they didn't make it in the show, but my theory was that one theory I have is that Americans are still not used to hearing women's voices in leadership roles. And I'm like, part of that is stand-up comedy, there's not enough women headlining. There's not enough women headlining shows at a lot of clubs, including the one we were sitting at. And that's part of the problem is the more they hear women taking over something, or talking or speaking, and the more they sort of submit to listening to somebody, the easier it will be for them to vote or feel comfortable having a female president.
You got a lot of press. Outlets would point out that you were the only female writer on Conan on the TBS show, and late
Just
night
for
has
a little
changed
while.
a lot.
Yeah.
Late night has definitely changed a lot. If you talk to people like Meryl Marco back when she was head writer at Letterman, when you talk to Madeline Smithberg when they were starting out the Daily Show, very few packets, they said, would come from women. And it was one of those things. I'm glad things have changed now, and it seems like they're getting more packets, and they're actively it seems like they're being proactive with seeking out voices. But yeah, in terms of like just going with packets, it's a shame that's how.
Well, I would have done a packet for the Daily Show had I known. No one told me. I don't know how, you at the time you only found out through a writing agent. And so now we're dependent on writing agents signing women, which they aren't. So you do have to, if you realize there's a bottleneck someplace, and then you need to go around it.
Seth Meyers, it seemed like, really did that early on his show, which I thought
was
great.
Yeah.
And hopefully that'll keep going. I'm always love going back to somebody that's had such a long career and done so much. Back in 1987, I don't know if at this point you had dropped out of UCLA, but it's this pivotal thing because you start doing stand-up your first time, I think it was at Foo Bars. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you did a Shakespeare play that year in March, which was Comedy of Errors at Diablo Valley College.
How do you know this?
I do my research. You could go either way. It's like, am I going to do? And you got a good review. You played the maid. What was the maid's name? I forget. But
I don't remember.
It's okay.
I had like 2 lines. I was like over 200 pounds because I had some kind of mental breakdown, and I was just climbing my way out of it. And I don't remember much. But it was fun. It was good.
Was your aspiration at that point that you might do plays, or did you?
Yeah, I'd always wanted to be an actress. Stand-up hadn't occurred to me till I went to see some stand-up. And then I was like, oh, I want to try that. And then once I did, I was totally hooked.
What was your favorite time on television in terms of doing a late night show? I mean, you did Kimmel, Corden, Conan. Was there a particular set that you're really proud of?
Gosh.
All of them.
No. I don't like engaging in these emotions of like, what was I proud of? I would say I'd rather talk about my worst set.
Let's talk about that. That's great. People love that.
There was this show in England, I think it was called The World Stands Up. And the club was a dance floor. And the audience was like seated on the dance. It was just like, what is this? And then they sucked. They were bad. The audience sucked. And it was a bunch of American comics. And I think to perform well in England, you have to be there for a while and figure out what they hate about Americans and accommodate them and acclimate that way and learn how they see you, It's like being a female comic. It takes a while to go, oh, okay, so they see me this way, so I need to come out this way. I'm not like a guy comic to them. So, of course, I hadn't done any of that. I just walked out, started doing my act, and I was bombing hard. And I was like, oh, my God. And then this other comic went out, and he's like, just pretend like you're killing. They're going to add laugh tracks. And I was like, and he did. And he bombed just as badly as I did. But if you look at his face, you think he's murdering. And then they added laughs in later, and it looked like he crushed. And I was like, that's just not what I want out of comedy. Like if I'm bombing or something's not working, I enjoy commenting on it. It's like, look at me. I just tried to be funny and it didn't work,
It was either Merv or Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin, the same thing. I think it was Johnny Dark was telling me that sometimes you'd get an audience and they would put the laughs in no matter what. It's so strange.
Yeah. Once you get it in the editor's hands and the producer or whatever, they're just making good television. They don't give a fuck about any of the jokes or anything. They're like, we're going to add laughs, and then people watching at home while they're ironing or whatever will think it was funny.
I'm big on comedians being supportive of one another, and Greg Rigel, who did a really killer set on Leno, I remember back in the day and stuff. You were in Dayton and Ohio with him, and I thought that this was really nice that you attributed this in an interview. And I really like when I hear this about comedians is that he knew you were moving to New York and he just picked up the phone right then and there and called 3 clubs and be like, you should have her.
He did.
Which is really nice.
He was awesome. And then when I moved there, I was like too embarrassed to call those clubs.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I did one. I can't remember it. I was like so overwhelmed, and I was like, I'm not ready. It was another thing, just like with the UK, if you're moving to New York from wherever you're moving, if you've been a performer in one state and you move to New York City, there's going to be a learning curve. The audiences are so different. The whole vibe is different, and it takes a while, And so I guess I had my ass handed to me pretty quickly because I was given spots at the comic strip like Friday and Saturday nights, and I was not ready for Friday or Saturday night crowds. I still had a very suburban act because I was mostly on the road in the suburbs, and I did not have any city polish, I was all suburban. And so I needed to get knocked around a little bit, and I did. And then I sort of mastered the New York City set, I guess. But it took a while.
Were you on set when, I know you knew Greg Giraldo,
Yeah.
Were you on set with the Dennis Leary
Yeah.
incident on Tough Crowd? I've talked to a couple people that were there and afterwards and stuff, how tense it was. What do you remember, and can you set up what happened? Basically, Leary was taking some shots at Giraldo.
Yeah.
And Giraldo was defending himself and being very witty and funny, and just basically he clobbered Leary, who was this huge star. And Giraldo wasn't really established at the time. But what do you remember?
I remember it just, I don't remember it being that tense. I just thought it was like an interesting moment. There was a lot of, they weren't that high profile with Leary, but these guys were always attacking each other.
It wasn't professional wrestling. It was real. They were upset with one another. That would actually happen.
I think Leary later said he wasn't upset, but yeah, he didn't play back. Right? Had Giraldo called somebody else out, like Keith Robinson or something, Keith would have hit him back and it would have been fun and funny. But Leary sort of took himself very seriously and wasn't playful, I remember it being sort of tense, but not like, it looked way more tense on television than to me it felt in the studio, because there was always, people were always like, butting heads and stuff. It definitely looked worse on TV.
During your 11 years at Conan, was there anybody that was a guest that you really wanted to meet that you went backstage to say hi to or get a photo?
Carol Burnett. I have a photo with her, and there's mascara running down my face because I had started crying. And Chrissy Hind, she signed her album. She signed it over to me. She had a vinyl copy. So I met her. Those are the only two I asked to meet. Our dressing room was sort of like this communal area. Like there were individual dressing rooms, and they all met into like this big sort of living room area. So frequently we writers would be hanging out there, after the mono was done, there's, we just hang out, if we didn't have a writing assignment to get to immediately. And then the stars would start congregating. Some of them would just stay hidden in their room, depending how big they were, I guess, hidden in their room. And then they were led out to Conan, and some of them would just stand around and talk, maybe not necessarily with, people working on the show, but maybe their publicist or whatever, but they'd hang out sort of communally and be somewhat available. I mean, people kind of knew not to always be bugging these people because they were guests, and we wanted them to come back and feel comfortable and not weird around us. So
I get that, but that's great. I'm sure Carol Burnett, that meant a lot to her. I know I got to interview her for a podcast I did, and she said she got really, with Cary Grant, she just had such a tough, I was like the one person she had a tough time.
Oh my God.
But I'm sure that meant a lot to her. Let's talk about your comedy special. This came out in December, late December, with Comedy Dynamics, and it's available on Amazon, Apple TV, and YouTube.
It came out January of 24. I shot it the previous year. Yeah, it's out.
I'm completely wrong on this.
That's okay.
So it's been out for a year. And what's it called?
It's called Cis Woke Grief Slut. And I have some comedy about my mom dying of COVID. I have some comedy about being doxxed and harassed for telling an abortion joke on MSNBC. At that point, right then was the height of dumb shit male comics talking about trans women. So I just wanted to come at it from a different point of view, which I did. And then cis woke. And then woke, named it woke because I figured that's what everyone was calling me behind my back. So I'll call myself that. And you guys can all get mad. It's on Hulu now.
Oh, good.
So Comedy Dynamics produced it, and then they just feed it out to different places. And Hulu, Hulu wasn't the original one, but Hulu's got like this new commitment to stand up. They did Roy Wood Jr.'s, Bill Burr, Zarna's got one coming out soon. So they're doing a lot of high profile stuff, and they just bought mine, which is kind of cool because it will sit in the same area as the Hulu special ones, and no one except comedy people would know that it wasn't like one of Hulu's.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's cool.
The El Portal Theater.
Yeah.
And I know that you have dates coming out. You're doing club dates in April, May, and June. So check out lauriekilmartin.com and your books and everything on your website, bestselling author. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm grateful.
Thanks so much. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it, Mark.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. On Apple Podcasts, please rate it and leave a review. Be sure to go to LateNighter.com for all your late night TV news. And you can find my podcast at LateNighter.com/podcasts. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.